If there's anything new, but nobody has anything new except for the speakers.
Yeah,
I'm sworn in secrecy.
he's one of them. Look at that. Blue hair all the way back. If you're one of the speeders. Well, how else do you explain the hair going from here to here?
Okay, there you go. Have it
That's the best you got, huh, Nick?
Well, trying to keep the crowd riveted.
I call the order of the meeting for Tuesday, April 20th at 7 p.m. Can I have a moment of silence for all those serving inside and outside of our borders, please? All right, will you please join me and stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can we have roll call, please, Mary?
Mayor Adrian Sandoval,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Larry Clark,
Here.
Mike Kelper,
Here.
Nick Ralston,
Here.
Spencer Brennan,
Here.
Troy Blum,
Here.
Jeremiah Overman.
Here.
All right, so audience, or actually, can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
I make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
I have a motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Agenda approved. First thing, audience participation. We have oath of office. Officer Dylan Zimmerly, sorry.
Thank you, Mrs. Mayor. So last month we had our sergeant that we swore in, and this evening we have Officer Zimmerly. We hired Officer Zimmerly at the beginning of the year. He worked a couple years for did you work for Hudson first or Leadville?
No, Leadville first and Hudson.
So he worked for Leadville first and the city of Hudson, and now he's here. So you can come on up if you want him.
This or
It's up to you. I can pin it on if you like.
there we go.
Or if you want to let anyone know something about yourself or not.
I guess if anybody has any questions, there I'll try to answer them the best I can with whatever somebody wants to know. Otherwise, it's going to be, we might be here all night.
Welcome to Platteville.
Yeah, it's
Thank
cool.
you.
All right. I'll let Mary swear you in real quick.
Yeah, I'll let you read it out.
Okay.
Raise your right hand, please. I, Dylan Zimmerly, do swear
I, Dylan Zimmerly, do swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of Colorado,
the Constitution of the State of Colorado,
and the laws of the State of Colorado,
and the laws of the State of Colorado,
and I will faithfully perform the duties
and I will faithfully perform the duties
of the Office of Police Officer
of the Office of Police Officer,
upon which I am about to enter,
upon which I'm about to enter,
to the best of my ability.
to the best of my ability.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
No, I don't, actually.
Okay.
Not my.
Hard mess away, photo op. Chief.
Sorry.
Sorry. Thank you.
Stabbing.
I think it's
That's
got
what the vest is for. It's not the only thing it's good for right now.
I checked out his target practice first.
And then we have one more next month, right?
We have one more when Officer Asher makes it out of FTO, so it'll be a couple months.
Perfect. All right.
So far, so good for him as well. So we'll see you in a couple months. Okay.
We're looking forward to it. Thanks, guys.
You hired him straight out of high school?
Just aged yourself.
Very small. There you go.
Thank you.
All right. Also, with the audience participation, we have the Arbor Day proclamation proclaiming April 26th as Arbor Day in Platteville. On that day, we'll have the 5th grade tree planting at 1 p.m. in Riverview Park, and so I invite everybody to join us. Moving on, with approval of the consent agenda, which includes the minutes of April sixth, 2021 regular meeting of the board, the March paid bills, and the March financials.
Move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Alright, consent agenda approved. Moving on to action items, the town clerk treasurer appointment. Mr. Rankin.
Thank you, Mrs. Mayor. Actually, I spoke to Danette Schlegel earlier today. She was driving in with her husband from Gypsum. She is not here yet at this time. I would like to move these to the end to see if she can be here on, I'm assuming there's traffic issue or maybe congestion.
Okay.
And if she can't make it tonight, I want to recommend moving this to the May 4th meeting.
Oh,
I'd like her to be here,
okay.
if that's okay.
Yep, absolutely.
So we'll play by ear tonight.
Okay, yeah,
Thank
absolutely.
you. She doesn't plan on starting until May 10th.
Okay,
So we have time.
perfect. So we'll bring that back up. Ordinance 799, the ordinance of the Board of Trustees of the Town of Platteville setting the compensation law. We're gonna hold off on that too.
Thank you, Mrs. Mayor.
All right, C, the Planning Commission appointment. Mr. Rankin.
All right. Sandy Smith has been on the planning commission. Mary informed me that her 4-year term has expired, is about to expire, and Mary contacted Sandy. She stopped by town hall, and she is very happy to stay on the commission for another term. So we did not advertise this position, and in order to make her position valid, we are asking the board you to reappoint Sandy Smith.
All right. So we have a motion to reappoint her. Yes, perfect. All right, any other questions, comments, concerns?
This is a recommendation upon you two.
Yes.
Is she doing a good job?
Absolutely.
I would entertain a motion, please.
Move to reappoint Sandra Smith to the fourth year term as planning commissioner for the town of Platteville as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Welcome back, Sandy.
We told Sandy she could be here if she wanted to, but otherwise she didn't.
All right, the first thing we have is a public hearing next. So we're going to recess the Board of Trustees meeting at 7:08 and open the public hearing at 7:08. And it's to consider amendments to the Town of Platteville 2021 budget. Mr. Rankin.
Thank you, Mrs. Mayor. This is an annual step to make our budget whole. Basically, as we start the year with a balanced budget, we go through budget deliberations, we try our budget forecast expenditures, we set them for, after we establish revenue estimates, we establish our operations budget, and then our capital budget. I've been manager for the last 12 plus years, and about half that time we've had budget amendments because of different situations. In this budget amendment, I'm talking to David Green, our accountant, and he's working with the Adams Group to finalize our budget, financial statements and our audit, which will be presented to the board at the next meeting on May 4th. There are 4 funds that, not by a whole lot, but they were slightly over budget. The first one being the Law Enforcement Equipment Training Fund. If you recall, this past year, we had an MDT purchase that was mandated, essentially mandated because Will County was making changes with that, plus our MDTs were very old. We hadn't budgeted for that quite yet, but because of the changes with the Will County requirements, the board approved Carl to buy some new MDTs. The LE fund is very stable, just slightly went over budget. Next was the general fund, the water fund. The water fund primarily is a capital outlay because of the water line replacement on that. We budgeted $105,000 based upon a previous estimate, ended up being 2.5 times that amount of money. So we went over budget in the water fund. The water fund still has a balanced budget as far as reserve funds. The general fund, the Diners property, $475,000 purchase was not budgeted for. So we went over about $100,000 in the general fund. Otherwise, we had a pretty stable budget there. We just used reserves. The last is the library fund, and it was HVAC systems repair, replacement for the library building that they initially didn't budget for, but then through the course of the year, they realized that they needed new systems. So those are the 4 items. It did impact the overall budget drastically, but we had to dip into reserves and reallocate year-end expenses to make the budget whole before the audit. And that's what those summaries are for. Be happy to answer any more questions.
questions. We don't have any public in audience. Any other questions from the board at this time during the public hearing?
So you said that $450,000 purchase and our general fund budget only went up by $100,000. So the rest of it was budget items that were not spent.
The rest, yeah, exactly, the rest of the budget was pretty stable. We typically have 300,000 to 500,000 revenues over expenditures, but we did budget that larger capital project in the general fund. I took that admin, capital outlay in the general fund, and that's what put us over by 100,000.
That's over budget.
Over, not, well, it's
So
over
not over
what we set as expenditures for the total general fund,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
Yes, correct.
So for the record, these extra dollars are coming out of the reserve fund?
Basically, it's reducing our reserve funds by doing so, and we still have almost 4 million in our reserve balance at this time. And the other 3 are special revenue funds, and 1 is the enterprise fund.
Any other questions, comments, concerns?
So with regards to the water revenue fund, what is our balance there, do you know?
The balance, excuse me. We usually start the year, just like in the general fund, in the negative until the revenues catch up. Then the water fund, let's see, sewer. I apologize. The water fund, well, with assets, the water fund has over 7 million, but in cash flow, the bank accounts, the fund balance is 3.8 million. And then we have some capital in water shares, tap fees. And right now, we budgeted 920,000 revenues, we received 110. We budgeted 743 in expenses, we've spent 132, so it takes a few months to get caught up on that revenues to expenses.
There's no reserve fund in that enterprise fund?
We don't establish a contingency, but the reserve is over $1 million in cash. Correct, yes.
The revenues in 2020 was over what we had budgeted as well.
And I'm gonna have Eric with Clifton Larson Allen discuss that in detail at the next meeting. The general fund, all the special revenue funds, we focus on the water and sewer specifically,
Perfect.
because those are big items that we'll be talking about in the near future.
Yeah.
Sewer first, but then water.
Fabulous.
Okay.
Any other questions during the public hearing? All right, it's 7:13, and I'm gonna close the public hearing. 13, and then we will re-adjourn the meeting of the Board of Trustees and open with a resolution 2021-09.
I move to approve resolution 2021-09, a resolution of the Board of Trustees of the Town of Platteville amending the town's 2020 budget as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Roll call, please, Mary.
Mike Calper,
Aye.
Nick Ralston,
Aye.
Spencer Bradnan,
Aye.
Troy Blum,
Aye.
Larry Clark,
Aye.
Jeremiah Overman.
Aye.
All right.
Mrs. Mayor, before we move on, I just want to make a comment on this year's budget. We already spent $240,000 that was unbudgeted for the water CBT share purchases, so I'll discuss that in more detail at an upcoming meeting, how we can make that whole by not doing another project potentially, but we'll have that conversation.
Or we make an amendment, and generally we just do all the amendments together, like this.
Right now, there's no amendment, but as we work through the year, we'll have that discussion probably in June.
Okay.
Just out of curiosity, this has nothing to do with the way I feel, but what happens in a situation like this when you ask the board to amend the budget if the board were to deny the amendment to a budget?
It would be reflected in our audit, and our audit would be submitted to the state as an unbalanced budget.
Okay.
And we probably receive a letter from the state of Colorado.
Okay.
Yep,
I
correct.
didn't know what the ramifications were, because we already spent the money, so.
Exactly, without doing this, and it's rare, but, I've never seen it before, but there are some towns that have financial difficulties and the state gets involved. And they essentially manage their budget until it's corrected. Worst case scenario.
Good question, I think.
So that's a good way to keep the state out.
Correct. Correct. And it's not like we don't have the funds.
I got lots.
We do have the funds in the general funds, the special revenue funds. It's just, when we allocate the expenses, it's a guesstimation. We want to do certain projects, but when a project comes up, like the Dice property purchase, we have that discussion, like how is this going to impact? And at the end of the year, it was pretty close. We could stay, but there were some other items that we still needed, that were regularly budgeted, that we still needed to spend.
Sure. So,
Well, there were items that we chose to spend.
That you chose, exactly.
So,
It'd be pretty crappy of us to say, yes, let's do all these things and then not approve it.
Well, for example, because of, it was a good asset purchase for the town by the Dice property. But for example, the streets fund, which is part of the general fund, we did not chip seal last year, which would have been another $160,000 on top of that. So we did give, some give and take. We did fewer capital projects to offset this expense. And we're gonna have that conversation again.
perfect.
Okay.
I like how you brought up chip seal too. It's been a hot topic.
Okay.
Do we want to move to Danette, or do you want to continue with us and just have her after these last three?
Let's finish up and then we'll do the kind of everything.
Perfect. Resolution 2021-10, a resolution of the Board of Trustees of the Town of Platteville amending the town's fee schedule. Mr. Rankin.
Thank you. For the record, I blame a rec director for this primarily, but I'm just kidding. Jen approached me about a new ball field rental agreement. She's getting a lot, I'm refer to Jen here in a minute, a lot of interest in renting ball fields from outside organizations that we want to ensure won't impact our local rec teams, but it's a way of bringing more money to the town. But also, besides the rec fees that are listed here, cleanup days was upon us, and we talked about last year about adjusting those fees. And previously I talked to David, a lot of towns will look at what they actually bring out by load type. And I think this is a fair way to do it, because I've seen, I use it every year too. I'll have the trailer, they put a trailer, and the lady behind me has a couple of boxes in the backseat of a car, we get charged the same. It's not fair. Plus, our costs are pretty significant with the roll-off dumpsters. I think I indicated that we paid over $12,000 last year for 2 full cleanup weekends, and only generate a couple $1,000. So this is to help offset the cost, number one, but realistically, it's more fair to our citizens if they want to bring a flat boy trailer compared to a small little Chevy as to a pickup truck. So those are my recommendations on the fee schedules. And then the admin fee has been $25 since I've been here. There's a lot more involved anymore on checking building permits for administration. It goes through Charlotte, Mary gets involved, I do zoning review. I think it's, making it $50 is pretty fair from the amount of work that we put into it. And what else is there? That's pretty much it. It was rec, cleanup weekend, and then the admin fee for the building permits. But I'm open to any questions. Janet, do you want to add to these fees that you proposed at all? No? Okay.
I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone has them.
Do we have like we have local football clubs, local other clubs that use the facilities? Do we have a local fee, or this is for everybody?
We didn't establish a local fee, only because typically if they were a nonprofit, we weren't charging them.
Right.
So,
Gotcha.
this was just for a group that comes in and wants to use the field more than once to make it more affordable for them, but still generating revenue for us. And the language that's in it actually spells out a little bit more as to what the expectations are and what their requirements are to us. So.
Okay.
Are the fees pretty comparable to other, I guess my main question is, this isn't gonna be driving business away from using the field. We're still a bit under other places, so they're gonna be, it's more appealing to use our ball field.
The two teams that came and talked to us were actually like surprised. One came in initially because someone had told them that we would let them have an entire season for $250, because that's how they had read the initial agreement, and I was like, no. $200 for a day if you want it. They've looked around. Ball field space is a premium right now. If you can find fields that you can practice on, most competitive teams are snatching it up because there's just no place to practice.
Okay.
So.
I just want to make sure these fees weren't going to be driving business away in other places. We're still going to have that.
Yeah, we'll still have it.
field.
I would just add, I think these fees are reasonable for a small community. My son's been part of the club the last 6 years, and we pay fields all over Greeley and a lot of tournaments, and those are, when we used to practice a small field at University High School, it was $45 a night for an hour and a half. That's per night. So I think these are very reasonable for even the small town teams, but also brings a little bit more money to revenue for the rec department when the fields aren't in use all the time. And Jen and I are talking that, you know, one goal is to utilize those fields as much as we can without impacting our local softball, t-ball, coach pitch teams. That's one caveat.
Yeah, I
This
read some
cannot
of that.
impact our local
Yeah.
schedule.
And one of the things that we just had that was actually interesting to see, and fun to watch, was we had a senior baseball team came out, and I couldn't quite wrap my head around what that was gonna be. And it's kind of a hybrid. They actually underhand pitch it, but they're 50 feet away from the batter. And they can hit it. I mean, there were guys clearing it over the fence, but the bases are set at 75 feet. So it's like a combination of both. But it was great to see an older generation still getting out there and playing and doing things. And so my goal is hopefully if we get some more activities out here and we have some more action going on in the field, that'll get people excited to come back and start playing after taking a year off with COVID. Yeah.
So I have some concerns about the cleanup day fees. Just doing quick research, Fort Lupton, Meade, and Frederick are offering free cleanup to their citizens. If you could say Frederick and Fort Lupton are giving a voucher to take one load to the landfill, and Meade is, you can just drop off one load of whatever size, so.
It's not whatever size.
Or, within their set size.
It's the first load, it's free.
Yeah, the first load.
Right. But are they more restricted on what they accept as well, or do we know that?
It says household items,
Yeah.
probably a little bit more restricted.
Yeah, we accept quite a bit, I think, compared to a lot of other towns.
And
I think
this,
it's still a bargain.
yeah, and this is a convenience too. I mean, you're right here in town, you don't have to go out to the dump and sit, and who knows how long that line could be.
And
But my concern is that, as well as maybe Spencer's there, that is this gonna deter people from actually cleaning up springtime and fall? I mean, what do you think, David?
If I may pipe in, I mentioned to probably 50% of the people that I talked to on Saturday when there was a comment about, is that all? When I told them we'd be adding $10 to next month's utility bill for that trip. And I said, well, just so you know, the board is considering some changes in this. It's probably gonna go up for next year. And almost to a person, it was, I'd pay double or even triple this because I would pay more than this in time, gas, and my fees to go to the dump for what I'm hauling to you guys right now.
Okay.
I did not, and I talked with Todd earlier today, neither one of us on Friday or Saturday had anybody that complained about the rate that it was. When we first started charging a few years ago, we got some grief, we explained what was going on, pretty soon that went away. I mean, when I first got here, we quit doing cleanup days on Saturday and Sunday, and we did it on Friday and Saturday, so that the public works staff would still get one day off that week. And we took some grief for that for a little bit, but then everybody got used to the Friday, Saturday thing, and we haven't heard any more about that. I'm not overly concerned about it. There'll be a few people in town that are used to very creatively stacking their trailers and getting probably, I mean, we had somebody pull in there with a tandem axle, probably a 22, 24 foot trailer this year that filled most of one dumpster.
Wow. Yeah, well, I can see them taking advantage of it too.
You know, and
I just kinda wanna get the feel of what you were out there, when I saw you out there.
We'll get a little bit of grief for the first time or two that we do this, but the other side of the coin is, you know, one of the people here in town that brings a very large dump truck on most cleanup days, he was frustrated because he had come to an agreement with us that when he brought that big dump truck, we would charge him this much, because it was basically 4 loads or 5 loads, and so we were charging him more for that, and he's like, well, you just charge them $20 for that trailer, and they've got as much or more on that trailer than I do here, and he was right. And so that's where Troy and I had the conversation. It's like, okay, how can we fair this up a little bit? And most people, when we've talked about the rates, you know, and I mentioned this weekend that you know, the town recoups somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 to 20% if we're lucky. As far as, I said, we're not doing it because we want to make money on it. We're trying to be a convenience to the community. The other thing that was really cool for me is we had a handful of new people. I had a guy that actually showed up, had the title to his house, because he hadn't had time to get his driver's license changed yet with the address, but he wanted to make sure he could bring some of his moving boxes and some other things, and he was excited to be there and was you know, happy to participate. And had a couple that came back that last fall when we were doing leaf and limb days. Well, no, we did cleanup days in the fall last year too. They were getting ready to go to Johnstown on Saturday morning and saw our sign out, came in, said, well, what can we do? We told them what was going on. They said, well, I guess we're not going to coffee at Johnstown. And they went back. They came back out on Saturday morning. They were so excited to bring some of their branches from the blizzard and some other stuff, you know. And so for the most part, I feel like it's really positive. Yes, we'll catch a little bit of flack for a little bit of time, but I heard from a couple of people in Meade that, you know, the limbs, you have to have them squared up or to a certain size, and you can't bring mattresses, and you can't, and there's a ton of things that, and for the most part, we take almost anything. So I think most people are pretty okay with it, Spencer and Nick.
Yeah, the biggest restriction is with the health department, we can no longer accept paint and oil, which is typical, but as far as household items, refrigerators, stuff like that. There's one year we took all these hot tubs, and 4 or 5 hot tubs filled one dumpster. That dumpster cost us $400. I mean, so I'm just trying to be fair. I mean, if people know this in advance, one thing I thought of is when we put the sign out of the hours, we'll actually have another sign that says what the rates are by vehicle size. So they know in advance that
Rate change.
You know, like with me, there's times where, you know, I'll take 2 or 3 loads out because I'm too lazy to stack it correctly. You know, I want to spend more time and make sure I stack it correctly because I don't want to spend a whole bunch of money. But I also want the stuff from my bathroom remodel, my backup from 4 months ago to get plastic inside my house. And if I know if I go to the dump, it's going to cost me a ton more money. So that's my reasoning. I mean, it's my suggestion to the board.
I think all you gotta do is take one trip out to the dumps and you realize.
Yeah.
It's a minimum of 7
Like I say, you could triple it, you could quadruple it, and I'd still be there.
It's gotta be covered and it's gotta.
Yeah, and I mean, you get there and it's $100 and some odd bucks to dump there, and you drove all the way up there, and you don't realize what a deal it is.
The majority of the loads, from watching it, are going to be $10 or $20. The standard pickup, the trailer, the cars. Those who bring out the bigger vehicles, I think from seeing these gentlemen mostly, they're going to be fine paying a bigger fee because they're the ones that know what's going to cost if they go to Alt or wherever else. That's just my opinion. But I don't want to overcharge and be excessive, but I don't think this is. So.
one of the biggest impacts, and we'll just let them know, is the storage unit place. Because they wait to clean out multiple storage units that have defaulted or are no longer, and then they wait till cleanup days and bring it to us. And they fill, lots of times there's more than one dumpster that was their stuff.
Can we have a business rate and then not charge citizens more, if that's the case? If you're saying that you're not trying to make money on this, but then you're trying to make more money, it seems counterproductive.
Well, it's not a profit. I mean, we're collecting about 2,000, we're paying 12,000. So
I understand.
I'm trying to just offset it. It's not even gonna offset the cost, but it's gonna help get it a sum to where it's more reasonable. I think trash service is an expensive commodity, to be honest with you. And I feel comfortable with it, living here, being part of the community. I think it's fair. And like David said, yeah, we'll get some grief like we always do when we change things, but then once people start shopping around, I think they'll see that we accept a lot of stuff.
I honestly think we should charge more, but that's, that's just me. I mean, it's a deal.
Yeah.
And all the stuff we take, you just can't beat it.
My main thing was I just wanted to discourage people from cleaning the yards up, and then the whole town starts getting in a disarray. But if you feel pretty comfortable that people would pay this, I mean, you were out there talking to everybody, so.
I am pretty comfortable that, somebody that brings a 30-foot or a 20-foot trailer, an 18-foot trailer, and only throws a couple things on it is gonna go talk to their neighbors and load up. I mean, I had multiple people that, they brought one pickup in and said, well, we went to 3 different neighbors' house to make sure we had it full when we came in, so people figure it out, work together, that kind of thing. Spencer, to answer your question, I don't know that we can have a commercial rate necessarily. I mean, you've got landlords in town that have multiple properties, so, they're some of our bigger bulk individuals that are coming in, but they also pay user rates on 19 different properties in town or something like that, so how do you is that a commercial or is that a residential, and that kind of thing. So, it all kind of works out. I think that we'll be okay with this, I honestly do, but
We can address it next year if we have a lot of problems with the rate change as well.
I don't want to do away with it by any means. I know they've been talking years past. And I actually think we should do the full spring and fall, but we'll talk about the fall in another meeting. Instead of just leaving them days. We'll see.
And we don't charge anything on these.
No.
yeah, we do.
Oh, we do on the tree. So we can't burn anymore. We have to haul those off.
Oh, you do? I thought we could burn them still.
And the biggest issue with the cleanup is we're gonna have to find another location to come to during this fall.
Yeah.
Because hopefully we'll have some footers in the ground and building's starting to go up by then.
My truck's getting old and don't make it too far from my house. Ask David, that old truck, I'm like to make 3 trips.
There's some big lots in Schultz that we can talk about.
You just put the down that road, down. At that Dinah's property, you got plenty of room there.
We'll figure it. We'll get something going temporarily.
Any other questions, comments, or concerns?
Real fast, so the sports, so flag football no longer is gonna be, so it's all going through this Twin Peaks, moving forward?
Yeah.
Okay, that question's gone, so.
We have the,
And what does that fee cover? That is significant compared to what they used to charge.
That's the fee that they charge us.
Well, I get that, but what does
Right.
it cover?
So they get their jersey, they get an actual like NFL style jersey with the flags. They get the games, the officials. They give out some swag during the season. They provide each coach or each game, they get a player of the game, where the coaches nominate a player of the game, and they give out prizes for that. It's substantially higher, and I actually didn't think that people would sign up for it because of the increase, but it didn't faze them.
We had a lot of people really happy with that, and they were fine paying an extra charge for it.
Yeah, so.
I just think, I have no problem with it, but, I mean, compared to club ball, or even where some other kids in the community play, like, they're playing tackle football for that same rate.
Right.
And they get jerseys at the end of the year, like, they get a lot of the same stuff.
Right.
So I guess I'm more, like, what does that money really go to? That, I mean, that's an honest question.
Right, it's
I
their
know what
overhead
jerseys
cost.
cost, I know how much refs cost.
But it's also their overhead cost for they
what?
have to rent the fields that they use. They don't own any land for fields. So they're renting fields, officials lining the fields. I know when we have our field here, we have soccer coming up next weekend that we're hosting. Well, we're not hosting it, NBAA is hosting it, but when I was doing it for flag football, it's $225 to have them come out and line the fields. And they had,
Use them brass.
well, Bumblebee.
Striping,
Yeah.
it's brass.
Yeah. And they have 40 fields that they're lining, so.
No, I get that, I'm
Yeah.
just, like, I still question where all that money's going, because I know how it all breaks down.
Right.
I mean, it's a lot of money for flag football. I'd pay it, cause I know other communities pay it, but I also know almost down to the dollar where every penny goes. Whereas like this, it's like, we're paying another organization, and in my opinion, we don't know where it all goes. That's just.
I'm happy to ask her to give me a breakdown that I can bring to the next meeting for you.
I'm just curious, because, I mean, like I said, for flag, that's pretty pricey, but other communities pay it, but I also know where all the money goes. I know how much refs cost, I know how much it costs to line fields, I know how much jerseys cost.
Yeah,
And it's not $129 per kid.
And it's a lot of these towns, and again, my experience with GYO and Greeley, they are truly revenue neutral. We are not. We backfill our rec department quite substantially just to keep our costs down. But you know, like a 5-game season at GYO for just rec ball, I paid $250 with no tournament, and we split on uniforms. So it's a money maker, honestly.
Oh, I
sub facilities,
but maybe those are questions we need to ask.
Absolutely.
Where's all this? You know, we're asking our community to pay this.
You know, I'm just looking to see if I have an email from her, because I did ask what the cost was last year.
And the town
I
makes
didn't
no
think
money
it
on
was.
that?
No.
No, we don't do anything.
It just lets our kids be on the same team, and then we provide practice space for them out here instead of them having to go into Longmont to practice.
Are these the fields on 119, Janet?
You know what, they actually play all over
Oh, do
in
they?
Longmont, yeah, because they can't get all the fields. Sandstone has, the majority of the fields at Sandstone go for soccer. So,
I think they have like 3 that are football, and that's it.
Yeah.
It's so weird.
Yeah. That's a nice facility.
It's big.
I'll look and see if I find it, and if I do, when it gets to my report, I'll let you know.
Once you get the information, pass it on to me and Mary. We'll just put it
Okay.
in, we'll upload it to the board. We'll keep up the notes in there so we can review it.
Any other questions, comments, concerns?
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay, valid.
Fair question.
Yep, absolutely. I would entertain a motion, please.
Move to approve resolution 2021-10, a resolution of the Board of Trustees of the Town of Platteville, amending the town's fee schedule as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Moving on to outdoor facilities rental guidelines and agreement, Mr. Rankin.
Thank you, Mrs. Mayor. I just referred to this. Janet proposed this to me. I worked with Mary. Mary cleaned up a little bit to condense it to fit our needs a little bit better, but otherwise this is from another town. reviewing it, the fees that you just approved are reflected in here. Pretty standard as far as the do's and don'ts for renting a facility. I've seen this quite often around the area. Everything from cleanup to vendors to insurance, field maintenance. They have some, what they call a la carte items. They can get adults, they can get an alcohol permit through the town if they want to have a tournament, like softball, the den deposits. I think it's pretty well written. I think it's fairly standard from what I've seen around the area that I've been involved in, and then the fee schedule is reflected on that last page prior to the application. But I don't have anything else to add. Jeff, do you have anything on this one?
Any other questions, comments, concerns? I have a motion, please.
Move to approve the outdoor facilities rental guidelines and agreement as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Alright. Moving on, agreement for services, Harvest Daze Entertainment, CEP Event Services. Mr. Rankin.
Thank you. First I went and visited the Historical Society, lovingly known as the Museum Ladies, and they said, let's use our 150th year since Town of Platteville has been founded as our event date. So we're going to have another party in 5 years anyway. Then we're incorporated, like Mike suggested. So, but with that said, because it's a significant date, for years I've been trying for a carnival. I just couldn't get one to attract one here because we just don't have enough foot traffic for them to make money. This is actually the same company that Janet's been using since this last year for the movie in the park, the rentals, or the once a month when COVID hit. So I talked to the lady Mariah. She sent me the information that's in your packet, some pricing. I asked her to include some pictures for you to look at. My thought is we could put this in the grass area of the ball field next to the food vendors, the dog park, the horseshoe pits. So it's kind of a kid zone. Usually the kid zone is in that open grass area next to the dog park. This would actually be an outfield of the inside the ball field fence.
Oh.
That way there's the distance between each attraction. So the west ball field would be the new kid zone. It's not just kids, adults, as you can see these pictures, it's all ages. So I try to, she gave me a long list, but I try to do like a zip line, the 4-station trampoline bungee jumping is a huge hit. The ball that makes you go dizzy, you spin like crazy. Then some classical ones, you've got your swings, you've got your little tilt-a-whirl, and there's this one that the two on each end, and there's no motor. The 4 people do it themselves by pushing and pulling, and it makes them spin. So you want to be part of somebody equivalent of your size, obviously. So, but real nice lady. This is a very popular company. I checked them out, but I thought we would add more to this year's event. It's going to cost more money. I'm asking the board. Totaling all these up for about 5 activities is about $15,000, just under. One thing I thought of since this is they also have a little train for the smaller kids, maybe Friday night during family night, having that take laps around Lincoln Park would be kind of cool.
Well, we have community members that we can reach out to.
Exactly. There's Miller Farm used to donate years ago, the Rotary Club that you were talking to me about earlier this week. But as far as these events, I think there's always talk about what do those who don't drink, play volleyball, and horseshoes do during the day. Well, this would give them an option, especially the teenage group, as well as the older group.
We also have that gaming trailer too, already.
The gaming trailers running toward the evening for a few hours for the computer whizzes. So like my geeky 14-year-old. So I don't know, it's just a thought. It's going to cost some money. We have a little over $20,000 in the Harvest Daze fund. We haven't done any donations yet. I set up my golf tournament. Jan's going to help out as well this year. She's already got a verbal commitment from Occidental to to donate $5,000 for the fireworks. Annandropa did previous year, so that wasn't anticipated. And then build up the golf team or the golf tournament as the big fundraiser. We usually bring in about 8,000 profit out of that golf tournament, so I'm trying to increase that to help offset these costs.
And historically, the town of Platteville donates $10,000 to the Harvest Daze fund.
In the past it has.
Except for the last 4 or 5 years, we haven't done any because the fundraising has been phenomenal, so.
Fundraising has been substantial, so the town stopped making a donation for Harvest Daze. And we worked hard to make it a donation-based event for the community. But just my suggestion, since this is our anniversary, since the town was founded, I thought it'd be an option.
I love it.
So.
Any other questions, comments, concerns?
Katie Tate from PDC Energy sent me an email a week or 2 ago, and I got back to her, but she was looking for whatever is next going on in Platteville, so I can throw her a line on this. You good?
That'd be great. And what I'd like to do, we have another Harvest Daze meeting on Thursday, is if the board approves this, I go out to businesses to see if they sponsor a ride. And they can put their name next to the ride, sponsored by the Doubletree as an example, or whatever business in town.
That's brilliant.
And then just say, hey, would you sponsor this ride for $1,200 or $1,500? And we promote our local businesses, whatever businesses.
That's a good
Right,
idea.
until Occidental, we'll put a big banner on the fence that says proud supporter of the fireworks of Harvest Daze.
Or PDC, yeah.
And we'll spend $100 a banner or sign, and that's nothing for their sponsorship.
Yeah. I love
So
it.
that's one idea to offset the cost.
I also think the mechanical bull is a necessity.
They do have mechanical bull.
Platteville, I'm saying.
But you got to give me some more money for that.
Wait, how much is that? Was it cheaper going through the old mechanical bull then?
I don't know.
I know what
That's
it is.
been years ago since we
If we do that, do we bring back the quiet house?
Yes. Shirley wants it.
Shirley, that's what I'm saying, Shirley was on there.
We have a trustee bull riding tournament?
I think.
Right.
We did that years ago, Mike. Do you
I
remember?
remember Hope riding.
After Hope wrote it, none of us got on. We're like, never mind.
That was a bad idea.
Yeah, they had some rock climbing and different things. I was trying to get actual rides, but they also have what I call the traditional gaming alley where they have the darts hitting the balloon, you get a little teddy bear, stuff like that. And I didn't go onto that, but yeah, the mechanical bull would be under $1,200. So I thought about it, but I need your help. I don't know.
And if I could just put in a plug for this company, this is who we used in Mead for Community Days. So when you do the bungee jumping trampoline thing, you're no longer having to find volunteers to man this station.
Right.
They provide someone
All the staff
to do it.
for
So
every ride.
And now the people who come to these rides aren't paying anything either, right?
No.
I was gonna ask.
They just,
It's all
okay.
prepaid.
Yep.
This is all prepaid.
Okay.
Perfect.
We rent it for a 5-hour period of time. And she mentioned, if you want to like charge a wristband for $5, unlimited ride, that's your decision. I haven't thought about that yet because this is an anniversary year. I wasn't going to charge anything, but in the future years, if this something continues, maybe get fewer rides or whatever. It's a discussion.
I think it definitely keep people there at the event. Because in the last couple of years, after the parade, it just became kind of a ghost town.
Yep.
Yeah.
I agree.
And
Well, it got so hot too.
well,
There's no trees.
Well, what I was going to suggest is doing the 4 to 9 slot, because you have your mud volleyball, then your horseshoes, and it usually winds up till like late afternoon, and it gets hot. So you can, that's up to you, but end it, start earlier, then end it earlier in the afternoon, and then there's nothing for the rest of the evening but the beer garden and the fireworks, or you start it later, and then when the beer garden, the band's going, there's something for the non-drinkers and the kids to do while everyone else is I'm just a thought. I don't know how you want to do that.
that sounds like.
Or you put the drinkers on the spinny ride.
No.
So the ball fields and everything and the activities going over there is pretty busy. Have we thought about setting up at the new Dynas property? Is that gonna be too muddy for them to, because they're gonna need to take time to set the bungee cord. I mean, all the rides are gonna need time to set that up, and if they set up, they're gonna be in the way of other festivities.
It just depends if there's a car show, because the car show goes on the east field, And right now, I don't have any confirmation about car show, so if there is, they come through that gate, go around the east field, then there's a double gate between the two fields, and then set up on the west. So they want to come through the crowd. So I don't know those
But
logistics yet.
That's all stuff that the committee works on.
Yeah, I just don't know the logistics yet. I think having it on that.
And I was just thinking about the car show, like, that's just, to me, it should be there, but,
Yeah.
having that set up in the ball fields, where are they gonna be able to set up this many rides? So I digress, I was just asking about where they're gonna set it up and making a suggestion there, but new property.
Logistically, I like the idea of having it on that west field because if parents are watching, say, mud volleyball, they can still see their kids close proximity. So it just adds, if you isolate it, then it gets complicated.
It's all where the kids end up anyways.
Yeah.
It's the West Ball Field.
Exactly, and.
Well, I was also thinking of the foot traffic and keeping our fields somewhat nice, but after that, just travel down.
Yep.
So.
As long as it doesn't pour down rain Friday night, we're okay. We've had that too.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments, concerns?
No.
I entertain a motion.
I move to approve an agreement for services with CEP Event Services for attractions for the Harvest Daze celebration on August 21st, 2021. An amount not to exceed $15,000, subject to review by legal counsel, and authorize the mayor to execute same.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Nick Ralston,
Aye.
Spencer Brandon,
Aye.
Fred Blum,
Aye.
Larry Clark,
Alright,
Jeremiah Overman,
Aye.
Mike Kelper.
Aye.
thank you everyone.
Thank you for finding
you.
that,
Yeah.
guys.
Really excited.
Yeah.
Well, Janet gave me the name and I just called Mariah and I was amazed what all they had. There's actually like 5 companies represented through CEP.
Yeah, they actually have a laser tag thing that's a maze that they bring out. That's what caught my attention, cause I was like, oh wow, you know.
There's a lot more on the website, so if you have time to check out the CEP website, I think it's on this email or this list. There's other events through the year, especially rec oriented, that the laser tag looks phenomenal. It's fun to walk climbing in the park, it'd be cool. There's other options.
That's great.
So.
Good contact to have.
Police in the park? Alright, take notes.
Yeah. All right.
No speeding.
Yeah.
I think it's the dump tank.
Trustees, right?
Moving on to the town clerk treasurer appointment. Danette is with us. Welcome, Danette.
Thank you. I would like to apologize, I got lost.
You're fine.
No worries. No worries.
I'm usually very prompt.
Metropolis.
So I will start, we'll have Mr. Rankin start with introductions.
Thank you, Mrs. Mayor. To start with, I'm gonna have Jeanette come up here in a second. Just to recap, I put my board report. For the last 2 months, we had a process, selection process, hiring process, as you well know. Mary, who's watching me very closely from behind, is gonna retire in the next few months. So, we had a good response from the RFP, about 50, right at 50. The selection went down to a first round of interviews that Mary and I conducted, mostly virtually, but some in person. Then Adrian was involved with the town clerk from Tacoma, who we assisted, and narrowed it down to a couple of finalists. I interviewed Danette and another finalist, and I was pleased that we had such a good turnout, and it was a very difficult decision, in all honesty. But after talking to the mayor, after I drove back from Gibson, which is a beautiful drive, by the way, I felt very comfortable with Danette, with her experience. She is a town clerk treasurer, was with Gibson just a few months ago. She stepped down from that position. But I am recommending Danette as an appointment for the town clerk. But before you do anything else, I'd like to have Danette step forward to the podium and introduce yourself. And don't worry, Platteville can be confusing at times.
I'm Danette Schlegel. I'm Danette Schlegel. I'm a Colorado native. I was the town clerk with Gypsum for 10 years and the administrative assistant to the town manager for 8 years. I recently resigned to move to Firestone, where my grandkids are. We're going to be living about 2 minutes away from them. We're very excited about the move. We drove by the house today. It's all done.
Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, welcome.
Well, thank you. I'm excited.
Yeah, good.
Questions from the board? This can be an interrogation if you want to. No, just kidding.
No.
I warned them that I have a weird sense of humor, so.
We're trying to keep the crowd riveted.
I know, but, Danette, I told the board in my staff report a little bit about your background. Was it first time outside of Eagle County, is that correct?
Yeah, I lived in Gypsum my whole life.
Yep. And,
so it's kind of a shock for me.
we talked about Will County and Platteville and kind of what our base is for businesses, and we're not a tourist town, and
right.
But it's a nice, comfortable family.
I think it'll be a
place.
refreshing change.
Yeah, and yeah, your resume is very impressive. So I'm glad you accepted.
Yes.
I made the conditional offer because I cannot hire her myself without you actually do the hiring. So.
Perfect.
And that's my recommendation to the board.
Any other questions, comments, concerns?
Do we have a retaining contract to make sure she sticks around? Town take her?
I'm not going anywhere.
All right, good to hear.
Well, the grandbabies are here, so you'll be here.
Yeah. Well, I just want to make sure Firestone didn't, have their eyes on her.
No.
No. All right, well, then I entertain the motion, please.
I move to approve ordinance 799.
First appoint her.
Oh, sorry. I move to appoint Danette Schlegel as town clerk / treasurer for the town of Platteville as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Welcome. No, that's okay. And then next is ordinance 799.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Ordinance 799 is a compensation the board has to establish for the town clerk, treasurer, and the town manager. The pay range, so the board knows, is $68,500 to $71,500. My recommendation, I always start someone off at the beginning of entry level, which is $68,500 in this position. And I told Danette, because of her background and the way Mary is very good at training, and I don't think Danette will take very long. I'm looking at probably asking the board to move her to the full position at $71,500 after 3 months. But I'll do that at the time. I'd like the board to start her at $68,500. I discussed that with Danette prior to, or this afternoon before she came.
Move to approve ordinance 799, an ordinance of the Board of Trustees of the Town of Platteville setting the compensation for the position of town clerk / town treasurer as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Roll call, please, Mary.
Spencer Bradnick,
Aye.
Troy Blum,
Aye.
Larry Clark,
Aye.
Jeremiah Overman,
Aye.
Mike Cowper,
Aye.
Nick Ralston.
Aye.
Perfect.
Then are you comfortable shaking hands?
Yep.
Come on up.
Step into the circle.
Go around and introduce yourself to the board one more time.
Hi.
Hi, you're my own.
Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. Thank you. Nice to meet you too. Yes. In person.
Yes, in person, that's right.
Welcome.
Hi Spencer, nice to meet you. Thank you.
Welcome, I'm Nick.
Nice to meet you.
Mike Calvo, welcome aboard.
Thanks, Mike.
I'm Janet.
Hi,
I'm the
Janet.
rent director.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
So I got one question. Are you a good cook?
Oh, that's
I am a good cook.
I'm David Brand, Public Works. It's nice to meet you. Welcome aboard.
We weren't gonna tell her. We were just gonna.
Just stop. Mary will fill you in on all that.
And other duties to sign.
Probably the same way every place.
So as of right now, the next start date is Monday, May 10th.
May 10th.
Give her because she's still in the process of moving in. You said your house was completed in
Yeah.
Firestone, so Mary has agreed to stay for a few more months to assist with the transition. Then as of today, starting today, Mary is advertising for the front office administrative assistant that could have developed to the deputy clerk. So we have one vacancy still to fill the front office. And Mary will be hands-on involved with that training as well.
Perfect.
And then,
So this is like actually happening. I've been in denial.
It's actually
Sorry,
happening,
Mary.
and I just sent out an email to staff, I think Adrian, you were part of that we will have a party. in a
Yes.
few months.
Yeah.
Good. Perfect.
And Mary won't be cooking.
And I was just gonna say, Mary's not cooking. Okay.
Sorry, Mary.
I'm the Mary of Honor at Platteville Daze, 150th anniversary.
Yes.
There you go.
All right, moving on
Grand
to.
Marshal.
Yeah.
There you go. Moving on to reports, so rec seniors, Janet.
So you have the staff report that I submitted. I'm happy to answer any questions. Been crazy busy.
I don't have any questions. Anybody else have any questions or comments?
No. You do a good report, I mean, you answer everything here, so.
Thank you, Janet. Moving on to police, Chief Burke.
Thank you. I also don't have anything I need to necessarily add. Have to answer any questions or
So with
concerns or.
the new two bodies, or soon to be two, I guess. Where are we at staffing wise?
So we're hiring one line officer and one SRO still. We have interviews in the upcoming weeks. There's an applicant that's flying out from, I think it's Miami, Arizona. He works for a small agency there for about 8 or 9 officers there right now. And his wife is from here. They want to come back here. So I've had some extensive conversations with him on the phone, and he looks good and really wants it. And so I think right now, the beginning of May, he'll fly out for a written exam and an oral board. There's also been 1 or 2 that's inquired about a resource officer spot in our schools. So slowly moving ahead with applicants, but no large big stacks, unfortunately, of either line officer or SRO at this time anyway. It would be nice to hire an SRO now before summer hits and then have them in an FTO in the summertime and then resume in the schools in the 21-22 school year.
Now, if we find ourselves at the start of the school year without an SRO, what's the plan there?
Well, so the one SRO that we have now has assumed all the schools for this past year.
The schools have
I
been
want to say
pretty much.
most of the year, and he's done really, really well. And that's kind of why we've been holding off hiring that second SRO, because he's done so well. When Matt worked in the mountains, he handled as many schools as we have now in Mesa County, and so he can handle it. He's happy with kind of hopping around the schools, and they're happy with him. And when he's up at the high school, for example, then us line officers will hang out more here, or vice versa. So we kind of make up where we lack in the SRO.
How does that work with the school district when we only have one SRO? We just charge them half what we contracted?
In the previous years, I have done that, and I reached out to Johan, and I've been, because he knows we're also, although we don't have 2 SROs, we're also having officers. The other day, there's 3 patrol cars around the schools. When I drove talk off him, I mean, he understands that we commit more than just Officer McChesney, so they've been paying the standard rate.
Okay.
And we're
Yeah,
gonna
I mean, I would assume that you're filling in with yourself and other officers. So I was just curious if the school was okay with what's.
They haven't had any issues to my knowledge, and Devin submits the monthly invoice. And Superintendent Johan, because I can't pronounce his last name, we're gonna meet in June again like we typically do, and address some issues in our contract, because we don't have that spelled out, number 1. And then like the Gilchrist service agreement with the town of Gilchrist, there's no rate change that's built into it like we have with them. It's been the same fee for the last 5+ years. And I'm comfortable with that because it's not a moneymaker. It offsets the cost of what we provide, including vehicles, equipment, training.
That's all we want to do.
Yep. It's not a money maker, just offset cost.
And I know that, they're very okay with us only having one, if that ensures we hire the right one to move into the schools kind of next, not hurry and rush and hire someone that's wrong for the schools or the town or staff that they'll be working with there, so.
It'd just be terrible to have something happen at the school where the officer isn't, and, you know, you're like, what if sort
Right.
of situation. You know,
Yeah.
that's
And
one
we,
thing.
Carl and I've talked about that, so school officials that, don't want to go into this too much tonight, but obviously, when you see those situations that happen in schools around the country, many of them actually have SROs. It's not like they don't, it's just timing, but it is very preventative in the meantime. And then being an SRO myself back in the 90s, just the information and that network between, we have an officer right now in the schools that's phenomenal. He knows every kid's first name. He knows where half of them live, their parents. That alone is a reassurance that they communicate when there's an issue. So he heads off a lot of potential issues too. So that's always a concern. And as Carl indicated, find somebody, because Matt gave a commitment, but that commitment will expire at some point. He also wants to retire in the next year or two. So that's a role that's going to be huge for Carl to fill.
Yeah.
And we've had other good SROs too. It's just maintaining them is, keeping them is difficult.
I thought I had SROs back in the old days.
I don't know if we'd be back olden days, but I was a part-time SRO when I worked graveyard as a sergeant back in the 90s. So.
Any other questions, comments, concerns for Chief Ware? All right, thank you. Moving on to Mr. Brand.
Thank you, Mrs. Mayor. The only thing I can think of right at this second is on the second page of my report, I went and shot my big mouth off last month on the board report that we'd probably have a snowstorm during cleanup days, and I guess it was a self-fulfilling prophecy. I've said for years I need to check and see when the farmers around the area need moisture, and that's when we'll schedule the spring cleanup, because we always seem to get some. But yeah, it works out. I mentioned earlier that we didn't get any complaints on prices. I didn't, but I got complaints that we did cleanup days too early in the season, even though it was one of the later ones that we've had. So we had some people that have been calling since the end of February asking us when it's going to be, and so it's kind of a no-win situation. You can't please everybody much of the time, it seems like, but we'll give it a shot. I'd be happy to answer any other questions.
All right.
Are you anticipating the delivery of your backhoe?
The official date, I believe, is July 11th or 12th, but they're still trying to push that up just a little bit more towards the end of June. So, and the salesman has been working on attempting to sell our old backhoe for us so that he doesn't have to do the paperwork, that we can just sell it and get the cash, and he doesn't have to deal with the process, and he can just sell us the new one. So.
Did we trade that into the people were buying that?
The John Deere that we agreed to purchase, they gave us, in the purchase agreement, they gave us a option to trade it in. If the town still owns it and decides to trade it, they'll give us $18,000 for the trade. If we can sell it either beforehand or about the same timing, we can get whatever we can get for it, and then they won't take it in on trade if we've got it sold. So they actually put that in the paperwork that it was optional, but they would give us the trade if the town decides to do that. So.
Any other questions, comments, concerns?
Just out of curiosity, did they get the jet hose and nozzle out of the sewer line then, or what happened there?
We did. And I've got that piece of pipe out back for show and tell, and I forgot to bring it in tonight.
You'll be bringing it.
You had to cut out a piece of pipe to get it out.
Oh, we cut out a little more than a piece of pipe. We've replaced almost 100 foot of pipe in that line. And
I thought it was a show and tell piece.
what's that?
That's actually a show and tell piece.
Yeah, the old pipe in there was Orangeburg pipe, and Orangeburg pipe is a tar paper pipe that started being made in the mid-40s during World War II when there wasn't any metal for ductile iron or cast iron pipes anymore. So they started making the pipes out of that. That was used until, Larry, you can probably help me with the timing, but I think Orangeburg pipe was used mid-40s to late 50s, early 60s, and then they started using vitrified clay pipe in that time frame.
Late 50s, I'd say.
Late 50s, okay. So the kicker is, Orangeburg works great until it doesn't. And what we found as we started to dig it up is that it was worn out on the top, it was worn out on the bottom, there were multiple areas that were starting to get holes into them, and literally what had happened is the jet nozzle had found one of those holes and had pushed its way through the pipe out into the surrounding dirt and sand, started pulling that back in, but then the nozzle, because we had a blockage in the pipe, they were using a big spinning nozzle that is larger than the normal size jet nozzle that you would use, but it works really well for cleaning roots and cleaning a lot of debris out of the pipe. So having used that nozzle myself in years past when I was running a jet on a regular basis, the thing is amazing until you get it stuck. So we ended up with Dale's Environmental Services out there helping keep the line sucked down so that we didn't flood anybody out in the process. Our first clue was on a Thursday night when the floor drains in the Everyday store started to back up a little bit. We were able to get that taken care of. They were the only customer that had anything coming up, and it was just on the floor drains. We didn't back into the apartments, we didn't back into the tortilla factory, we didn't back into the church, or the old church that sits behind the tortilla factory. So we got ahead of it there, we stayed ahead of it, we ended up bringing in a crew. The line, I'd have to draw you a picture for it, but the line comes down here, there's either a missing manhole or a bend in the line. They put a manhole in the middle, and then there's another bend over here. We could not TV it, we couldn't get the jetters through it. It was just a...
I just cut you off. I just wanted a yes or no.
Sorry. Yes, we got it out.
You know that church used to be the police station?
Not that one, but the other one did.
Oh, yeah. You were talking about that.
And the tortilla factory used to be a hardware store, I guess.
Oh, yeah. I
So-
was in there. You can find anything you wanted. It took about 3 hours.
But
Has the DOT reviewed their sidewalk drawings yet, or is that still happening? In progress.
As far as what they're wanting to do along Main Street here?
No, on Division.
On Division. We've got a meeting scheduled next week. Monday. Okay. So yes. Sort of.
They're gonna give birth to those plans finally?
We will find out on Monday, because I don't know for sure.
It's a process, Larry, because with CDOT standards,
It's the DOT, of course it's a process.
There's an environmental review, there's different segments of CDOT, there's a historical review, make sure there's no jumping mouse in the area, I mean, all kinds of stuff that we jump to. A lot of the Brad Curtis engineers signing off on it, they're accepting it, that way it's cutting down, but the review process took longer than anticipated. We'd hoped to get it done over a month ago. And we do have a scheduled meeting Monday afternoon it's a virtual meeting with Brad Curtis, David and I, and CDOT officials to hopefully stamp the final plans and get that rolling. Okay.
At that point, you're just waiting, you're gonna send it out to bid.
We have to follow all CDOT standards for bidding. We're going to go through that process probably starting next month.
Okay.
And our engineer will bid it out for us.
Okay.
Yep.
So it'll be done by the time I have to plow it next week.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
Just put a plow in front of that running lawnmower, right?
Oh, yeah, that's
Okay.
the plan.
Did we move on to attorney? I apologize.
Excuse me?
Okay, any other questions, comments, concerns for Mr. Friend? All right, you all have the, report from our attorney. If you have any questions, we can ask Mr. Rankin and you can get those addressed. Any questions? Okay, moving on to Mr. Rankin.
Mr. Mayor, I provided a fairly extensive list of items in my report. A couple things I want to just touch base on. Under planning and development, I had a long conversation with the representative Alex Schatz with this proposed mining operation from United Ready-Mix Cement or Concrete Company. We're going to have a lunch meeting next Tuesday to discuss potentially annexation, but right now he said they have an old permit in Weld County, approved by Weld County, that has to be renewed, which will take about a year process. I was pretty blunt with them about what our intentions are as far as, you know, growth boundary. We annexed the property to the north of that. We talked a little bit about Firestone. He did tell me that it would be roughly a 15-year mining operation, but the water rights have already been obtained by Dixie Water Company, and one of those representatives may be at the meeting as well. I can discuss this, they're not part of Platteville yet, so it's an open dialogue. But I'm curious to talk to him. But right now they plan on staying in Weld County unless something changes. But he's willing to meet with me, so definitely want to pursue that. I mentioned also in a couple weeks I meet with Mr. Kruger, the town manager of Firestone. They just wrapped up, from my understanding, their land use agreement with the city of Fort Lupton along County 19 from 26 south to roughly 16. And that was a joint, and I read the joint agreement, but I read the IGA, and it seemed pretty consistent to other ones we have with Milliken and Fort Lupton and Meade and Gilchrist. So I'm optimistic there. Already talked about the Division Sidewalk Project. That's a 1 o'clock meeting on Friday. The Lincoln Park Playground has been ordered. Little hiccup with the performance and bond, but that's been resolved. I mentioned in my report some study sessions. I just wanted to summarize, if it's okay with the board, with the second Tuesday of the next 3 months. The first one is going to be pretty important. Then next week, Friday, DNWC, we have a meeting with JV and Moles to get the final construction for the wastewater facility. And when we meet with the board, I propose doing this before the second meeting in May. So Dave and I can have that dialogue with you of what, kind of the breakdown of what those costs are. And there's always options. And David's going to explain what those options are, okay? And then in June, I'd like to discuss what, David? Options are expensive in wastewater, so I'm going to have him talk about that. Development opportunities. I'm sorry?
He just found out he's presenting.
I've told my staff many times as they can attest to. But in June, full conversation with the board on development opportunities. Talked to Melissa today, she'll be there. As well as Brad Curtis, he's revised that community complex master plan. Based upon our last conversation on how we can add more parking and not have an easement for the property owner to the north. I mean, there's discussions that we need to partake in. And then also in July, I'm going to wrap up our, what I call our summer study session schedule with, we budgeted to do a comprehensive plan update to have the water component, number one, but also to discuss how we can get our rural farm community residents involved with their growth vision or boundaries of Platteville. I think that's important. And then Melissa, I was talking today about the water supply plan. I need to schedule a meeting with Adrian Spencer, the town engineer, town attorney, and David Knights. We were part of that program, and we discussed some various options on that. And it's water supply plan is not. I wouldn't say it's easy, but there's different components to it. Everything from dedication requirements to water regulations to conservation, raw water. For example, Randy Ray from Colorado Well Central Conservation District, whatever it is.
Central Colorado Water Conservancy District.
That's it. Last week, emailed David and I. They're looking at a grant opportunity from the state And he wants to meet with us next Tuesday, I believe it is, to discuss a partnership with Platteville to pursue a master water supply plan, which essentially we could use raw water and mix it with CPT water to increase our fold of usable water and treat it. And it's a grant funding opportunity. So I'll update the board after that meeting, at the next meeting, how that works. So things are just quickly coming in line that goes with that water supply plan.
Perfect.
What I mentioned with the sanitization in the future water storage facilities. And lastly, Adrian knows this, but I reached out to the library board. I think we should have an annual get together, like a dinner with the library board, the planning commission, and the town board, and look at doing that in September or October. Never really done that, but I think annually it's good to know who's in charge where, because I don't know if any one of you would recognize the entire library board if you saw them, and vice versa. So I think, and we're all part of one unit of our government, so I think we're gonna do that in September, October, probably at the community center of the senior center. With my report, I had the CERS audit, first time ever, got 100%, which I'm happy with. That's neither here or there.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's a big deal.
Staff does a good job with meeting all requirements. Again, it's another voluntary situation. The CCWCB annual report is in the packet, just as a reference for you to review if you're interested. Couple of updates. Coronavirus relief fund. The town has $86,000 remaining in that fund. I've been working with staff, Janet and Carl and David, Mary, at the next meeting on May 4th, I'm going to be recommending some purchase items with the board. The state rep with DOLA that's managing this grant has reached out to me and David, well, not David Green, not David Brand, about basically giving the money back. And I said, no, we'll find a way to use the money, because the other towns that have already spent their money want more. And not to be selfish, but if we can use this for example, Mary gave me a quote today to upgrade the whole boardroom system with cameras and speakers, and that came in about $25,000 roughly. Janet has a wish list for the seniors and some rec. Poor Carl gives me a list and they all get declined, which is unfortunate. David, I think we're gonna order some more tables and tents and stuff that we use. But the key to this is it's a little frustrating, and I'll be honest, in my own opinion, for things that I think would be practically used for this funding, I can't apply for. You can't go after capital projects, like renovating the front counter with a walk-up window, so if we have another pandemic, God forbid, we close down town hall, people can still walk up to the service window outside. Things like that are declined. I will bring that to the board on May 4th. Recently, President Biden pursued the American Rescue Plan Act. I reached out to Don Ward today. His last email to all of us managers in Weld County was back in February 12th, so he gave me an update today that it's still in the works. This final amount still have not been confirmed by the U.S. Treasury Department. As of right now, the town of Platteville is to receive $511,654 of that $2.9 trillion bill. And $350 billion of that is for this program, for government. And upon what I found today, talking to Mr. Warden, one category that it could be used for is water, sewer, and infrastructure improvements. So once that's confirmed, obviously we have a water plant. We have sewer issues or water issues that we have to deal with, increasing, changing these 2 6-inch lines to a 14-inch and increase our pressure volume. So that money could be really utilized for port improvements to the community. So that's coming down the pike, but Don didn't know exactly when. And I already mentioned the meeting with Randy Ray. David and I, I'll wrap this up. David and I had a meeting with CDOT regarding, and I kind of had to laugh, they reached out this past year and they have a funding project in Weld County along the 85 corridor primarily to make all the ADA ramps in their right of way, i.e. our Main Street, up to standards, by current standards. So last year, Todd in Public Works told me some lady was running up and down their street with a tape measure with a CDOT vehicle. Well, that's what she was doing. She was measuring the slope, the width, and the dimensions of all our 88 ramps. So needless to say, this next summer, 2022, they showed David and I their plans. So each intersection that's not compliant, so they're gonna basically improve them to make them compliant for ADA accessibility. Katrina Cloperdance, their new traffic engineer, relatively new from last year, is in charge of this project. They're doing it all over Will County, but primarily 85 corridor. That will be discussed in June as part of that development and infrastructure conversation, because we'll have some more details there. But for example, across the street, 7-Eleven, they had planned on redoing the ramps on that corner and also on the Vasquez corner. We told them it's done. They didn't know that. So part of that dialogue, but they weren't going to do it on this corner across from Town Hall. So I said 2 for 1. That's what we paid for by the 7-11 developers. Do the one across from Town Hall so I could do a sidewalk to the auto sales and liquor store and also to the old fire station so we can make that intersection whole. So that's in the works. I haven't received confirmation back yet. But also with that going into 2022, which I'm getting ahead of myself when we go on the budget, if they're investing that into those intersections, that now would be a good time in our sidewalk maintenance fund to complete sidewalks on all those side streets on both sides of Main Street. It makes sense, but we'll talk about that this fall too. So, other than that, I mentioned the Harvest Daze meeting on Thursday. Everyone's welcome to attend if they can. It's 1 o'clock. I'll wrap it up. Any questions you may have?
Any more questions, comments,
Yeah, I just want to go back to some of the stuff with the Reynolds Street, and Excel's going to have it done by the end of May. So are we looking at starting, it's going to be, you're saying about a 4-month project. Are you going to start it after Harvest Daze, or are we going to start it as soon as we can and have Harvest Daze work into that? I hate to see us lose 2 months of good weather to get it worked on, to hold off until after Harvest Daze.
So the answer is yes and no. Okay.
There you have it.
Dave and I talked about that with Brad Curtis. So right now, nothing's changed. Excel and Atmos they will finish up their underground. They're potholing right now, but they're supposed to be done. It's not, is it Sturgeon for Excel?
Mm-hmm.
Sturgeon with Excel and this other company for Atmos.
Poly is for
CenturyLink.
CenturyLink.
So that's who's out there right now. I think CenturyLink. Excel's moved in yet. So they'll finish up mid to late May. Dave and I talked to Brad Curtis about when we send out that the plans are done. Basically, we're going to send that out for bid. And correct me if I'm wrong, David. What it's going to stipulate with the contractors is we have Harvest Daze. We don't want to waste time. So if they can start in that window of June, July, early August, so we don't know what the scope is. We're anticipating with a 90-day scope to get this project.
Somewhere between, 90 to 100 days, something like that.
So if they can start right away, say in early June, mid-June, get a great deal done, but then they have a hard stop order on Harvest Daze weekend. But with them not working, we also have to have full access to everything.
Right.
The mud volleyball, the ball fields. So they have to do it in a way that if they can't get it done, we don't want to start after Harvest Daze because it's snow season.
Right.
So we want to start it sooner or later, but that's going to have to be dealt with because that's going to be one of our biggest Harvest Daze events. Right. So yes, good question. I didn't bring that up, but that's a good question.
True. One of the other things that Brad brought up the other day was that that if we give them the flexibility of saying, okay, it's this window of time and you have to leave Harvest Daze available, if they've got some time pre-Harvest Daze to come in and stay do the storm sewer part of it, and then they come back and finish all the curb gutter, sidewalk, and the street afterwards, or if they know that they could give us a better price and they could start right after Harvest Daze, but they would get everything done, they could go finish up another job or whatever. But if we give them the flexibility of not saying it's got to start after Harvest Daze or it's got to be done by Harvest Daze, then we'll probably get a better price because the contractor can say, well, I can have this crew in here now, I can do this part, and this part, and let them have the flexibility. We'll probably see better pricing than if we said, you have to get it done before Harvest Daze or you have to get it done after Harvest Daze. So that's what we're shooting for.
Yeah, that's a big project. I'm anxious to get that rolling.
Yeah, I know we talked about last meeting, but I was like, man, if we wait till after Harvest Daze, that's,
No.
I mean, we're pushing into the winter time and, you know.
Even with school out of session, I could get a lot of that going, and then if they have a few weeks to a month after Harvest Daze while school in session. My goal, my best option or opportunity on this one is if they can start right away, get the subgrade for the storm drain, do the curb and gutter on the sidewalk, and then after Harvest Daze come in and pave and wrap up the details, that'd be great.
Yeah.
But I just don't know that. We won't know until we bid it out.
Well, plus you don't know when their availability is too, so.
And right now, construction costs are through the roof, and I'm a little apprehensive about if we make budget, so we'll have that conversation when time comes, when we get bids. Because David's been trying to get bids, one thing we budgeted was expansion of the public workshop. That's out to bid right now, I think.
We're about to go out.
About to go out. Right now, the cost of steel is through the roof.
Everything is.
Everything is wood, lumber, steel, so it's gonna be some hard decisions coming up.
Yeah.
Bring it all to the board.
Sounds like the Grand Avenue repaving is dying a slow death too.
Not buried yet, but I'm not optimistic yet.
I don't remember us making the deal that we were buying the CBT shares in lieu of paving the road, but you made it sound that way in your report.
I want to hold off on it. I think the chip sealing and patching needs to be done. We already held that off for 1 year.
Right.
Especially, the patching and chip sealing, especially around the schools, because those streets are pretty well tore up from their previous construction. And that's part of our, that's fairly affordable. That's a priority in my opinion. And I'm gonna ask David to do that out pretty soon in the summertime. But Reynolds needs, needs to be year 2 of the big project. We need to wrap that up. We have improvements to the community complex, the Dines property, all that's gonna fall in line. So.
But didn't we agree to spend reserve funds to complete all of these projects, including?
We did.
Grand Avenue, right?
We did. And there's a limit that we set in the budget. You talk about budget amendments. There's a limit we set, and I'm watching that limit because we already spent $240,000 of that limit.
Sure.
And so I want to see how revenues come in, and then the way I'm going to approach it, Spencer, is if we get mid-late summer and our revenues are coming in pretty good, and the staff is doing what they typically do, and they're pretty conservative. It's like, okay, I'll ask the board, let's spend a little bit more, let's complete our projects, knowing that we're going to have to amend the general fund, but our revenues are stable. That's my approach.
Absolutely.
If they're not, then I'm gonna say, let's talk about this in budget. So that's what we're gonna do.
Just hate to see it die.
I don't want to. I'd love to see that repaved with a new sidewalk from Town Hall down to River.
It's gonna be busy down here with 7-Eleven open now.
Yeah, last time it was at May 3rd, 4th?
May 5th.
May 5th?
Cinco de Mayo.
Cinco de Mayo.
How do you forget?
I know my girls are looking forward to slushies.
Yeah.
I'll probably be buying Town Hall tacos that day.
Or that, approximately 500,000 is mentioned from the Recovery Act. If and when that shows up at our door, is there any problem with depositing those funds into an enterprise fund on a legal basis?
I don't have an answer yet, because like Don Warren said, we don't know what the stipulations or restrictions are.
Okay.
How it gets spent, if it has to be spent, on what it's spent for. There's some broad categories that I researched today, so I couldn't find it anymore. So I reached out to Don Warren, and then I got online and read about the latest updates. And there's some for housing, there's one category, like I said, for water, sewer, infrastructure improvements, but that's all it says. So it doesn't really give me enough.
Okay.
And the one thing it did say is of that $500,000, the initial, once approved by the U.S. Treasury, half of that, so $250,000 roughly, will be given up front, but the other half will not be given until 12 months after. So it'll be in 2022. So that's the one thing we have to talk about. But I'm kind of speculating based upon what I know from my research. I don't know the exact answers yet, but we'll definitely talk about that coming up.
Okay, we're all familiar with the legalities of an enterprise fund and where the money can come from. I didn't know if and that might be an exception.
And I mentioned that first study session next month. David will be here, as he found out tonight. but no, probably June too. But Kim Crawford,
Let's
our
go for
bond
June.
counsel, will be in attendance either in person or virtually because, I'll be honest with you, I'm looking at our enterprise fund status and how to reduce our debt service, so I won't be throwing curveballs, I'll be throwing fastballs that night.
Okay.
Because I want this town to get out of debt in less than 30 years. My goal is in 10 years we're back out of debt.
Nothing like prepaying a mortgage.
But I can't stand the thought of paying $2.5 million interest on a 30-year loan.
Absolutely. You're preaching to the choir there, brother.
Okay. So that'll be more fun. Sorry, Adrian.
No, that's okay. Any other questions, comments, concerns from Mr. Rankin?
I got one more thing.
Okay.
Okay, we talked about this, about Senate Bill 217, and with Carl. I had a meeting last week with Sheriff Reeves, we talked about this, and about the lawsuits. You know, like and I don't know if anybody knows how some of the details of that, but if an officer arrests somebody and they didn't like how they were handled and stuff, they can file a lawsuit against the officer, and they can be sued, and then they have to pay up to $25,000. And I was talking to Adrian about it, the sheriff's deputies are backed by the county commissioner said that they would cover the lawsuit for them. So I brought that up to Adrian about, do we need to cover our officers for that too? So I don't know if you want to talk more about that, or do you guys know more about that?
I did. Carl and I talked about it as well as Adrian. I went back and looked at it and Carl sent me that bill and he gave me some additional information because he went to a training on that specific Senate bill with a search legal rep that I'm very familiar with. He's pretty good. He knows his Q's and P's. But the way I read the bill is that if an officer, is charged on a criminal act on that kind of situation, then the town is to indemnify the officer up to the point where the officer may be criminally charged or convicted. That officer then is personally responsible for up to 5% of the total litigation or judgment found on the officer, or $25,000, or whichever's less. 5% of the total amount for $25,000. Correct me if I'm wrong, Carl, because we talked about this at length. But the way I read it in the last paragraph of that section on the litigation is that if the officer cannot afford to pay that litigation amount, then the town's insurance carrier shall pay that amount. So ultimately, the town will pay and support that officer. So you make a good point. I mean, it's up to the board on how they want to approach this, but I think, in my view, if we have any employee, not just a police officer, that's convicted of a criminal offense and we don't want to support that employee.
Right.
Officer, no officer.
Right.
But I understand the sheriff's position. I don't disagree with Steve. I think law enforcement needs to have our support too. But, like I said, there's employees in all professions that make mistakes.
Well, I think the environment out there right now is, it could be just a little thing and somebody could take it the wrong way, and then here's an officer having to deal with a situation that, it's overblown situation, so.
Well, my standard practice is over the years with the employees.
Sure, I think that's overblown to make some wild-eyed assumption about what the politics of the country are and what their attitude towards police are, and then translate that into policy is just wrong.
On this position, if I may wrap this up, on this Senate bill and the way the approach has always been before the Senate bill even came out, Carl and I had this conversation, that the town board is involved with these conversations from the get-go. I've been through similar situations myself, not with this issue, but with law enforcement issues and civil issues. The board meets with the town manager, myself, and legal counsel, the town attorney, and CERSA, because CERSA defends us in workers' comp property casualty. Been years since I've been through this. I've been in the federal court twice. We won both. But the board makes a final decision. The board will be asked through the insurance carrier, CERSA rep, and the town attorney as a guide, because CERSA takes over, of how this case will be managed, what you're willing to pay for or not pay for. And at the end of the day, if it ends up being a criminal violation and an employee is charged, You make the final decision on that, and this Senate bill, that's where the town doesn't indemnify, but may end up paying at the end of the day.
And there's only one, the officer, he or she doesn't have to be criminally charged. It would have to result in a settlement on the town.
A conviction and a settlement on the town.
Right, it doesn't have to be a criminal charge,
So
simply
even if
an allegation.
the officer isn't criminally charged with anything, but there is a settlement, that officer's gonna be responsible for.
As long as they weren't acting in inappropriate manner, yeah.
For the statute. There's key violations that have to be found or adjudicated against that officer in that case. It can't be just anything. It's specific as far as the type of offense. And it has to do with, civil rights violations when it comes down to it. And we hold our police department at a high standard. Carl's always putting them through training.
But
I
a
will
civil
never-
rights violation he wouldn't be necessarily charged criminally.
Civilly.
Exactly right.
Potentially civilly.
And he's on his own as far as any liability. Is that right?
It can go both ways. A plaintiff can file, and I've seen this, I went through it myself, they can file a lawsuit civilly against the town of Platteville and name the specific employee in the same lawsuit. So it can be one or the other, or it can be both.
Where
Does the police union have, is there any type of insurance that they carry?
Yes,
Covers
so
them in that case?
there's many that's working on. Most officers have legal representation of some sort, either Legal Shield or like FOP or something like that, and they're working on some kind of insurance that we could invest in, and in the event that we're sued, and you guys say no, we don't want to represent this officer after learning the information that's laid out in that certain event, then that officer could fall back on the insurance that they would get. But it's up to you guys. Where it used to be more or less you guys would handle any settlement, anything that's on us officers. This now opens it up to, well, now the officer will pay up to the maximum $25,000 in a settlement.
And there's no discretion of the town when it comes to that?
Yes, you guys could absolutely say, we'll retain that. We'll retain that, or CIRSA would, but it's up to you to represent us.
But CIRSA has
CIRSA
a say
would
in
pay it.
whether we take it all on, because they're covered.
CIRSA will tell you what you're paying for as far as coverage with workers' comp. And I've been through this myself personally and professionally, where you go through a civil litigation. It wasn't this type, but it was still civil litigation, not criminal. And the judge orders, it was a officer involved shooting back in 2010. That's what I'm referring to. I went to federal court on that. Our officer responded. It was civilly. It was not criminal in nature. The judge ended up giving a settlement for the family because there were children involved. CIRSA paid it under the town board's guidance because it was the right thing to do. And the officers were retained because they were not found out of the line of duty for what they did. They were exonerated from wrongful act, but yet the town still paid some money for the children of that individual who was killed.
But what I'm getting at is, if something like that would come down the pipe again, then when it's agreed that they're gonna pay this, that officer would be then responsible for that percentage.
Unless the
Yes.
town said they were gonna pay it.
Unless the town said they're gonna pay it, and does CIRSA have any say into whether we decide we're gonna pay it?
The statute that I read this afternoon clearly stated that the town insurance carrier shall pay the 5% or $25,000, whichever is less, if the officer is not capable of paying that amount on that situation.
But will they pay it if the town just says, we want you to pay it?
I don't know that answer.
So basically,
I can ask CIRSA, because this is still relatively new. I haven't seen a live case.
When does it come into effect?
That part of it, so this whole, some of it was last year, some of it this year, some of it next year, and it's ending in 2023. As far as the recorders and all that.
The Senate bill is phased.
Yeah, it's not all a lump sum, and I can appreciate Sheriff Reams wants to support his officers out in the open and let them know that we have your back. And obviously, as a law enforcement officer, I can see how that would help retain officers, that would help hire officers, and that would be much appreciated by the officers, because who has an extra $25,000 laying around in the event, even if you assume that you acted right and it's wrong, you get sued, it's up to us. It's up to us to come up with that extra money. So I think Sheriff Reams just wants to reassure all of his guys that in the event that this happens, we have your back.
If they get sued or the settlement, do they still have to resign from being a police officer?
Only if certain things, if it was a bad shoot or somebody used some kind of excessive stuff on them, well then, no, they'll get yanked. Their certification will be yanked at the state level. Right. That's not a sheriff's office or an agency level. It'll be yanked. Their certification. They'll lose their certification.
Colorado Post has a very specific list of charges that if an officer violates, they're no longer a police officer. They call it out.
And was this added in there? This kind of outlines. Okay, and I'm more than happy to give you this, and this kind of outlines step by step in regards to everything that is happening through the Senate bill.
And this is a layman's basically term of the Senate bill.
This is an overview.
An overview. And this is by Cersei's attorney, who was hired by Cersei to train law enforcement throughout Colorado under Cersei's umbrella. So they have a very clear understanding of what they should or should not do, what they can and can't do. And especially the police chiefs of what the requirements they have to meet the 3-year phasing. Like the body cams, the retention, the training, the records. So it's very detailed. I want you to hand that to Mary when you're tomorrow, and we'll get that to the board so they can review it. So.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask if you could just send it out too.
So the board could elect to, if the 25,000 came up, and we just, the officer was in the right, it wasn't some gross negligent thing, we can elect to just pay that 25,000 out of the general fund, right? Or true. It doesn't have to come from Cersei, it could just come from the board of.
Why would you pay it out of the general fund if the insurance company's gonna pay it for it?
I'm saying that they won't pay it. That's was the argument by Mr. Cowper, was that they may not elect to pay that 25,000.
And my feeling is even if the insurance company has to step in and pay it because the officer can't, the insurance company will try to get their money eventually from them. And you know, their business, they're gonna do what they need to. They got shareholders, they got, you know, they got fiduciary responsibility to try to collect all the money they can. So just the fact that they'll pay it if he can't doesn't mean that he's off the hook.
Well, true. Well, they're going to go through that process, and that's between them and their legal team. But I've never seen, again, I don't have the greatest experience, I have my own, but I don't see Cersei not covering under our policy what they say they'll cover. And unless an employee is convicted of a criminal act, they'll cover it. And I'll verify that with Cersei in the near future.
This sort of outlines new ways that we can have our certification revoked. This outlines new reports that I have to submit every year to the state. This outlines what kind of holds that we're allowed to and not now after Mr. Floyd. So this kind of has an outline on everything, and after you guys read, if you have any questions, I'll try to answer them the best I can. It doesn't say when exactly this is in effect. I think it's 2023. Okay. I think it is, but it doesn't. I thought it was maybe outlined on here, but.
So try to be interrupt. I just wanted to let you know that Carl and I and Adrian had this conversation. Carl and I at length read the Senate bill, have a pretty good understanding where the town stands as far as what litigation responsibilities the town has. I'll double check with Sarsa, but, I'll defer back to you.
Well, thank you for that research on it, I appreciate it. We were talking about it in our meeting last week, and I was thinking about, you know, our town and what liabilities and insurances and stuff that we would have to protect our officers in case there was some.
Is that something you would want us to do, Carl?
I mean, I think this whole thing helps hold those accountable that needs to be held more accountable. And I think it will help those who have their head on right and straight. That said, I think anytime an officer gets hired on with an agency, knowing that they have support of the town manager, the mayor, and the entire board, and me, and everybody, that's huge, because that's going away fast.
Yeah.
It's going away fast in the state of Colorado with this and all the other Senate bills that's been flying our way. And so I think that reassurance is huge. And I think for me, if I were going to want to go work for an agency that offered that and that reassurance, like Sheriff Reams is, and one not, and you're kind of on your own out there. I wish you luck though. I would go obviously to the city or the town that is supportive. And I sure hope that no one lets you guys down. I mean, if you guys offer something like that, I mean, this is really to help officers. I don't know.
I think if
an extra step back to really know what they're doing before they move forward.
Well, Carl, you're not just sitting behind a desk either.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So,
we all
your
know.
opinion.
Exactly, and I appreciate that, Carl. We know we're in difficult times, especially today, and things that came out. But the board needs to know that the way I manage is all the employees know that they have a standard that they live and they work by. Officers, more so, because what they do off duty is more as important as they do on duty. And make it very clear, I will support you wholeheartedly until I can't. If you commit a criminal act, I'll go from your best friend to your worst enemy. Sorry, because it's my reputation and mine too. So that's pretty clear with our police department. So let's not have one incident affect our 10 people, because it does not. They're going to learn from this and they'll get better.
I think that's a concern. If we offer this policy and then there is a grossly negligent offense, the town still is going to put money towards that, right? Isn't that what we're saying? Like, if the officer makes a mistake,
No.
isn't that what Reams is doing?
No.
No?
No, if it's a legitimate case against him, no. But if it's something that's.
If it's
Even if it's a civil? Even if it's a civil case where it looks bad but it's not quite criminal?
If an officer ends up, if the district attorney ends up charging that officer, the board's going to have to make a decision. Typically, there's administrative leave, because you're in this country, you're innocent until proven guilty. Last time I checked, and there's a lot of times where they end up being innocent. Because I lived that in my life myself. But I will check with CERS on when that point comes to where you say we're done. You know, we can't support you anymore. The way I read this bill is up until that conviction date, you do your due diligence, because up to that point, that officer is innocent until proven guilty. Then that's when you stop. That's when the money stops. That's when the officer needs to be on his own. But according to this bill, even if he's on his own, this insurance carrier still pays.
Yeah.
Because I'm just trying to figure out what Reams is offering over what we're.
Well, they're basically offering to backfill if an officer's sued, the town sued, and the officer's gonna get stuck with whatever percentage, $25,000. I think if it's not a criminal situation, which that probably happens more than we know.
It does. It does.
It does. There are
does.
settlements made when there's no charges filed, and in the case of our situation, we found no wrongdoing. So that's what he's offering.
Yep, when we find no
Because,
wrongdoing.
You know, otherwise, the officer's gonna be stuck with that $25,000.
He did say he's got a couple that they're dealing with right now, that, you know, and it's something that the officer didn't do anything wrong, but that's what, the one guy that created all the ACLU stuff at the jail, I don't know if you remember, the COVID stuff, that, the guy this guy burned his house down, and his girlfriend was in the house, and he was gonna kill her, burn the house down. Well, they survived, and, he had major lung damage, got into jail, and they were trying to take care of him in and out of the hospital, and, he eventually died because he quit taking the oxygen, he didn't want to do any of the treatments and stuff, and he actually died in the jail. And so now his girlfriend that he tried to kill is suing the sheriff's office for, there's just all kinds of different things out there that is happening. You know, if this guy tried to kill her, it had been out, she's suing the sheriff's department for him dying in the jail.
And the other thing you need to take into consideration when you're dealing with insurance companies is it's in their hands, and they'll settle. They'll settle. And then whether you like it or not, they'll settle.
On the civil suit, that's definitely an option.
Yeah, and then you've got a policeman who's stuck with that chunk.
If I can just make one more, I think the reason why we have this is so the officer takes an extra second to say, am I going to do something right or wrong? And there's consequences if you act out of line. $25,000. So I think Sheriff Freeman is saying, we want you to come to work and try your hard, keep your head in the game on what you should be doing every day when you come to work. We don't want you to unnecessarily worry about a consequence, about something that could go wrong. We want you to be smart and learn and go out there and be a good cop. But we don't want you to worry unnecessarily about $25,000 or anything else. So we have your back in the event that you're sued or the town sued, the sheriff's office is sued. We're going to take care of that. I think that's what they were hoping for with this whole thing.
And we all should just keep in mind that the civil and the criminal standards are very different. The criminal standards, based on probable cause, beyond a reasonable doubt. Civil is a different standard. It's a lot easier to get money out of civil claims than you do all these criminal. Criminal is not a money issue. It's a criminal conviction issue. We're talking about the money issue. So I'll reach out to Sarsa. Eric Zaporn is a legal counsel that represents Sarsa, or he works for he's his own attorney. Sarsa contracts with him because he's one of the best in the state of Colorado. He's the one that provided Carl his training. He's the one that worked with me directly 12 years ago on a couple of claims, and I'll reach out to see if he can meet with us to make sure we're very clear on what your expectations, what your roles are, and there's gonna be a lot more of that. A lot more of that. But we'll continue holding our officers at the highest standard. And I think in our track record between Carl and I, we've proven that we won't not hold that standard. I'm not going to look the other way. No.
I don't think the board would consider a policy like that, though, I'll be honest. I mean, it seems like we want to retain officers, we want you to be able to hire people, right?
I deferred back to citizens, and I know there's a majority of citizens who want us to support our officers.
Sure. I just don't want to support something bad. I just really worry like something bad happens and we still have to give them money.
No, I don't think anybody wants to support that,
No, and it gets a little twisted, but that is not what this is about. That's what it comes down to.
Right.
If you have any employee that is committing an act that is criminally charged, we're not going to support that.
Exactly.
When it gets to that point, they're innocent until proven guilty. And if we don't take that approach, then nobody's going to work for us. I mean, public works can be sued. I mean, there's so much out there.
I mean, next, what public works digs a hole, somebody steps in it, and the guy that ran the backhoe now has to be responsible for $25,000 of the suit. I mean, they're employees. They're people doing a job. And now we've chosen this one group of employees doing a job, and we've told them, if the town gets sued and you were involved, then you're gonna have to pay a chunk of it. It's insanely outrageous.
Pleasure, Mayor. back to you in the near future.
Perfect, thank you. All right, anything else for Mr. Rankin? Okay, you guys all take note of the 3 study sessions that Trey proposed. Is that okay with everybody? First one's May 11th at 6:30. They're all the second Tuesday.
I will, on May 4th, I will have a detailed handout for you. So you can put it on the fridge or whatever, and you'll have it electronically as well. That way it's more defined.
Okay.
This was a summary, but I will.
May 11th is the first one.
Yeah, May 11th is the first one.
It's the
and then-
second Tuesday of the next 3 months.
Yep, yep, second Tuesdays.
And the next.
All at 6:30.
Yep,
All at 6:30, fuel will be provided, one way or another.
Yeah.
And then, I think all 3 will be important, but the first one's gonna involve a lot of money conversation in May.
Woohoo.
Okay?
Perfect.
Right.
Is there anything else for the full board work? Return. Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Well, thank you for having me.